Hi, everybody. Welcome to Discover College Soccer. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Coach Bauer from the University of Valley Forge. Welcome, Coach.
How we doing? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You are the head men's coach over there, Division III school outside of Philly, kind of near the historical landmark of the Valley Forge National Park, but the other historical landmark, the King of Prussia Mall, which
Oh yeah.
everybody has to swing by when they're in that area, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Big attraction. Big
Yeah,
attraction.
yeah. Well, uh, I'm sure that's one of your recruiting tent poles is, hey, come be close to the mall. But in all seriousness, we're talking end of July, getting ready for preseason. I'm sure your 23s are done and dusted. Everybody's getting excited to come in, but what does your recruiting calendar look like? Are you just focused on 24s right now? When do you want to wrap those up? Do you talk to 25s at this point, or is it a little too early? What's that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I would say probably 80 to 90% of our time is dedicated to 24s. We have a handful of 25s that we're connected with some local ties, or even we have a younger brother and a younger cousin who have kind of been in the fold throughout uh, you know their sibling or cousins recruiting process as well. But I think for the most part, we kind of keep those guys just involved in our schedule more than we are involved in their schedule for the 25s. Just because for us, it's so much more advantageous for us to lock in on 24s. And that percentage of time will probably be committed through the end of the calendar year. So, and then we kind of open that up a little bit more, once we get into January, once we get into the spring semester.
Okay, makes sense. Well, in terms of that recruiting, are there events that are kind of the must-see TV, the places you're going each year to help build out that recruiting list?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is such a rich area for soccer. Not only, our competition, right? The number of Division III college programs in this area, especially that compete at a very high level, is awesome. But it also means, right, that we have to really get after it. So, I think of probably the top three even nationally recognized clubs in this area outside of the Philadelphia Union's academy would probably be FC Delco, Penn Fusion, and Ukrainian Nationals. All of them have really high quality events both in the fall and in the spring that we find ourselves at. Whether it be my entire staff, including myself, or just my assistants, or just myself, we find ourselves at those tournaments. And again, just kind of right around the King of Prussia Mall area, which is nice for us, right in our backyard. And then we have EDP. A lot of our roster comes from that league. Guys that played in Philly area, guys that play in Jersey, North and South. So we get ourselves in those capacities a lot, and that's kind of like the club wheelhouse that we kind of live in. Outside of that, outside of our own events, we would probably have the next most important event for us. Messiah University puts on a Christian college ID camp every summer. We've been fortunate enough to be invited to that over the last few years, and it's been really advantageous for our recruiting, just because there's an assumed baseline of guys who are interested in attending a faith-based Christian university, and because that's our identity, it kind of allows us an assumed context to kind of recruit out of, which is really nice and beneficial for us. So those would probably be the top things outside of the things that we run on campus that we pull most of our guys from.
All right, that sounds good. Well, whether you're at an ID camp or at a tournament or something, kind of what's the hierarchy of things that you're looking for in a player that's going to make you want to say, "Hey, we want you at Valley Forge."
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, it's really three areas that we recruit out of. Obviously, the soccer side of it is really important. We want to be competitive, and we want to kind of continue to raise the level of our program year after year. But probably just from a strictly soccer speaking standpoint, we're just looking for really hard workers because we're not yet at the level where we feel that we can just kind of get the cream of the crop, the guys that are playing at the highest level, very high technical level players. While we do have that in our roster and we do land those guys, right now we're at the phase where we need the guys that are going to grind on the ball and off the ball. We need guys that are going to work really, really hard. So that's really the top thing that we look at. Obviously, everything else is important, right? Soccer IQ, positional need that we have within our roster, as well as the style of play that we'd like to go. But from a soccer standpoint, that's really important. But arguably more important than that is the culture that we're building here, which is a high value in academia, as well as the fit of the institution, right? As a University of Valley Forge is a private Christian university. And there are a lot of faith-based schools that run their programs, aligned with that. And, it's different from school to school, but for us, that's something that we really, really value. We want guys that want to operate in a Christian setting. They value discipleship at the university and within the program. So that's the number one filter that we push all of our recruiting through. We want guys that want that. If you don't want that, hey, even if you're the great fit for us on the field, it's probably not going to be the best fit, from start to finish for 4 years. And then ultimately, as a Division III university, right, the high achieving academia is huge for us. We've set a goal within our program to be the highest achieving men's program on campus. And we've been successful in that since I've been here the majority of the semesters, right? The team GPA is awesome. Like, I can tout that, but really it's about the character and quality of the individuals on our team that are putting in the work in the classroom, in study hall, and have set themselves up to be successful. Those are the three things. I'm sure we could, talk for hours and hours on each of those individual prongs, but I think that's a pretty good overview of what we're looking for in recruiting.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, in terms of just the overall recruiting, are you? I noticed on your roster you have a couple internationals, which D3, that's not always the case, right?
Right.
And I know you mentioned kind of that, we'll call it regional focused recruiting, but you got players from kind of all over the country, so how are you picking those up? Are you looking at the transfer portal at all? Does the school have special international programs? Kind of how's that roster being built like that?
Sure. I think, right now moving into this upcoming year, we have guys from, I think, 10 states. And we have guys also that are either refugees, or maybe they're first generation Americans, or even, they were born here and spent the majority of their life in a different country. So it kind of goes in a different way for kind of everybody. But yeah, we have guys from Arizona and California. I'm born and raised from the Phoenix area. I coached there for almost 10 years at the high school and college level before I took this. So I have a lot of connections out there. And we go out to President's Day tournament and Mayor's Cup in Phoenix and Las Vegas, respectively, every February. So that's where kind of that niche comes from that area. And then really we just try to localize it the best that we can. The school in general is an extremely diverse place, and our roster actually represents that really well. Again, we have a pair of brothers that are Rwandan refugees, but they would say that they're from PA because they've lived the majority of their life there. We have a young man from Haiti who, again, spent most of his life in the States, but obviously, again, coming from Haiti, being a first generation American in that sense too. Is really cool. So we don't necessarily reach out specifically to internationals. We had 2 internationals on the team last year, one of whom spent all of his high school career in the States at a small Christian high school. The other one was probably the most traditional international player, I guess you could say, living in Ecuador his whole life and then coming to the States for college soccer. And that's kind of what that looks like. So we don't outright seek that stuff. We don't outright, have legitimate connections with, recruiting agencies from different countries and so forth. But as they come kind of organically, we kind of move from that. In terms of the transfer portal, we also don't really roll into that as well. I think at our level, at Division III level, it's not necessarily something that's super advantageous. We have a handful of transfers this year that are going to be junior college transfers. Again, my experience before I was at the University of Valley Forge was at the NAI level, that's a major focus, both of those things, international recruiting as well as junior college transfers. So I still kind of have a little hint of that in my wheelhouse, but for the most part, we want guys that are from generally this area, and that reflects what our school looks like, which again is pretty much what it looks like on our roster, which is cool because it wasn't that way, when I first got here. We had guys, from all over the place, and that's great and that's awesome. But I think starting to more centralize and localize our roster is going to only be better for the growth of our program.
No, it sounds great. Well, I'll give you the easiest question here about your recruiting. Is there a target roster size that you're trying to hit each year?
Yeah, so for us, this has been a 3-year project to get our roster to where, in my opinion, what it needs to be competitive at the Division 3 level. When I was hired just a few years ago, we just weren't at a healthy roster size. It makes it hard to compete. The college soccer season is a grind, and it's a real challenge. So for us, the last 3 years have been larger recruiting classes in order to build to that roster size number. So we want to live between 25 and 29. For us, that's the wheelhouse. We don't have visions of a JV program or a reserve team or what have you. I was a coach of one of those teams at the NAI level before I did this, and there are ways to do that well, and that's awesome. But it's just not our vision here at the university, nor is it our athletic department vision. None of our programs have JV teams or reserve teams. So we want to live between 24 and 29. So for us, ultimately, that's a 6 to 8 person recruiting class every year. Now, we haven't done that the last 3 years. We've been much larger than that to kind of establish what we want in our base. But moving forward, our 24, our 25, our 26 classes will hopefully be within that 6 to 8 wheelhouse.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the school. I'm sure there's folks not familiar. You've
Sure.
now been there a few years. What are some of the awesome things that you found about Valley Forge? Maybe some things we wouldn't know just by going through the website.
Yeah, I mean, I think, very, very similar, and I'm sure a lot of other coaches would echo this, but for us, the most important thing about our school is the people. I think for me that's been somebody who came from the other side of the country, to PA, just being able to be a part of a community, not just the faculty and staff, right, but the student body as well. Is just really committed to who the school wants to be. And, we alluded to that earlier in terms of like what we want to recruit, right? We're intentional about our faith here at the university. Again, I've been in public and other private Christian universities, and I've seen it run differently at different places. And, for here at Valley Forge, I think that's been the top thing for me is just how committed, kind of from top to bottom, right? From, whether you want to start at the cabinet and the board of trustees and the president of the college or university, down to, the incoming first year students, the buy-in to who we are at the university is very strong, which is really cool. And again, not to say it's unique per se, because, I have colleagues who would probably echo the same sentiment at their location. But for me, that's been probably the top tier thing that we have on campus is the guys. And then for me specifically, right, would be the guys in my locker room, right? I love those guys. My kids love those guys. They love being able to, have the soccer boys over, to get the fire pit going and s'mores going in the backyard. I think that for me is kind of how I think that paints a really good picture of what I love most about where I am.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned earlier about the academics, and obviously it is a student athlete that you have on your roster. So how do your players really balance the demands of playing college soccer as well as the classroom demands? What kind of support systems does a school offer also to help them with that?
Sure. So I'll start specifically with our program. And this is pseudo departmentally, but not every program is required to do this. But this is something we found that works for us, so that we do this. So for all of our first year student athletes, we require internally 2 things. We require a minimum of 4 hours of study hall a week, and we require a bi-weekly grade check. Ultimately for us, and in my experience, it's very rarely the intellect that's the challenge for the first year student athlete. It's the time management, right? So being able to scaffold that and monitor that internally is huge for us. We have an athletics department in our staff. We have a couple of TAs that specifically monitor our study hall as well as my assistant coach. So that's kind of like our first line of defense that we use kind of internally. But it does start in the recruiting process, right? Like we have a couple of guys coming in that they are concerned about how they're going to be in college, right? So we've already set them up with what we have institutionally, and institutionally, I think we do a great job. We have our director of student success is a former college student athlete, so she fully understands and gets the balance and the delicate sometimes how it can get out of balance. And she oversees kind of all of our student success on campus. So we're talking about career services, we're talking about tutoring and peer mentors, and so we can align our students with that department really well, and they've been an extreme help for us in our department. And I think that ultimately allows us to see that success in the classroom. And then again, like from the Division III side of things, like our guys aren't missing loads of class, right? We structure our practice and game schedule the best we can to maximize the time our student athletes are in the classroom. And ultimately we try to balance that from fall to spring. The spring, maybe it's a little bit heavier academically on the guys just because we have a little bit more time on our hands just with what we're allowed to do. But I think those are probably the top things that we do, not just in our program, but kind of in our department and in our institution that kind of supports that student athlete.
Well, it was a perfect lead into my next question was what can you tell me about what that normal week looks like during the season? Fast forward to
Yeah.
October,
Yeah.
what's kind of the normal week in terms of practice schedule, game schedule, when's classes, meals, all the things.
Yeah. I mean, all the things. That's a great way to put it, right? We get into October, right? That's our conference season, right? So it's the most challenging time, I think, for the college student athlete. Probably why you're asking that question, right? But we're on 6 days a week in some capacity, right? Probably in October we're in conference, so we have 2 games a week. Our conference schedule kind of alternates the weekday game again to kind of balance that academia. So we're a Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday situation. So every time we have a Tuesday, Saturday week, our Wednesday, there's no contact in training the next day, right? So a lot of it's film study, it's recovery, it's some technical work, it's an opportunity to kind of let the bodies kind of relax a little bit. Again, that comes from our history as well. With a very limited roster over the last couple of years, it's exponential the amount of minutes and the amount of injuries that take place when your roster's a lot smaller, right? So we should have a little bit more freedom as we build from now. But so what we do is we typically train, the 4 days that we're not playing, with one of them probably being some sort of recovery day. Maybe we're in the classroom, for 80% of the practice period, looking at film, kind of maybe getting into the weight room and doing some recovery. In addition to that, twice a week, we have our strength and conditioning coach on campus. She's a former Division I soccer player, so she gets us too, which is great. So obviously in season, it's a lot of injury prevention stuff. So these are going to be mornings twice a week where we're in there doing injury prevention, a lot of recovery and stretching, especially in October. We're not maxing out on bench or squat or anything like that in October by any means. A lot of that stuff, right, is coming in the spring. But yeah, we're on 4 days a week of training, 2 days of playing, where again, one of those trainings is a lot lighter. We typically train in the afternoon. We share our practice facility with our women's team. And so we might, especially in October, find opportunities to go in the morning and kind of balance it with them and our guys' schedules. But I think that hopefully answers that question. It's a little vague, but ultimately that's what our October looks like.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about the team and the soccer side of things. I know you mentioned your ideal roster size from a player perspective, but let's talk about the rest of the team, your staff. You mentioned it before. So how big is your staff? What role does everybody play there? And what other kind of support staff? You mentioned the strength and conditioning coach, but what other kind of support staff does the athletic department offer as well for the team?
Yeah, so we'll start with my staff. So it's a real honor for me because my 2 assistants are both alum of the school. So my assistant coach, he his career kind of ended with COVID. So it was kind of a strange dichotomy for him. I knew that he had more left to give the program and kind of put the ball in his court to decide what he wanted to do. Do his fifth year in play, or he has aspirations of coaching at this level. So he chose to be my assistant coach. So he's going into year 3 as my assistant coach, which is exciting. He kind of does it all, but his main focus is goalkeepers. That's been a task that he's been a kind of, I don't know, put on his plate as the number one priority the last couple of years. And then this year, again, with our roster, actually looking healthy, we're bringing in a GA, again, who's a former UVF men's soccer alum. And so he's going to help us out as well. This will be his first year on staff, and this will be our first time having 3 guys, with the coach's title, that are going to be running stuff. And so all of us will kind of be an all hands on deck staff for the most part. We have a student manager as well who does a lot of stuff for us. A lot of the really things that sometimes can get overlooked and overshadowed. I mean, he's not just a ball boy, but he loves to serve the group. He whatever the team needs, he wants to do it, and that's awesome. We're so thankful for him and what he does. So that's kind of like what we have in our in-house. Zoom out a little bit to the athletics department. Again, we have an FAR, so we have a faculty academic representative. So, Dr. Robertson's awesome, huge advocate for sports, student athletes. He's a big fan. He's come to a bunch of games, for all of our sports, not just men's soccer, which he's extremely helpful for us. We have, as I mentioned before, we have a couple of TAs internally from our department. I think, kind of off the top of my head, I think that's kind of it. I think the other side of it is we are a small school, so the ratio of professors to students, it's 1 to 11 or 11 to 1 if you want to go the other way. And so I think sometimes they can kind of seem like an extension of our staff just because of the relationships that get built between professors and student athletes and students in general. And then in terms of, the non-academic side, I mentioned Coach Maeda, our strength and conditioning coach. She runs all of our strength and conditioning for us as well as the rest of the department. But as selfishly, I know as a former Division I player, I'm like, soccer player, I'm like, well, she's ours, right? She knows what we want the most, and she's great and has been a huge asset for our program. Obviously, athletic training as well. Athletic training staff is imperative, especially like you said in October. They're your best friends. So that's been a huge asset for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now I got to turn the tables, focus on you. So how would you
Sure.
describe, your style of coaching and the team style of play and what you're trying to do on the field?
Yeah, I mean, this is still, I think, a work in progress, which is great, which I love. I think, for me, the most important thing is that, I'm building relationships with the young men in my program. That starts with the recruiting. We have core values that we build everything out of, and that starts in the recruiting process. That starts in the summer workout. That starts in preseason. All of that stuff to lays that foundation so that there is a level of love and trust. Not just between myself and the players, but between the players and the guy next to them or the guy behind them on the bench or the assistant coaches. So I think the relationship side of it is extremely important for what we do. And that's the huge side of it. Now for us, obviously, without getting too terribly into the nitty gritty, right? Like we like to play in the middle of the field, the middle block of the field, the middle third of the field. Both defensively and with the ball on our feet. We're not gonna counter press crazy high up the field. We're not gonna have that level of high press. And you look at some of obviously the top teams, even our conference, are really good at that stuff. And then you look at the national tournament last year, you have guys that are really comfortable defending very deep and absorbing a lot. For us, that's not what we want to do. We want to have a little bit higher line of confrontation and defend higher up the field in a mid block where we feel comfortable that when we win the ball, we can counter if we'd like. We like to again play in the middle of the field. When not that we have all of the fancy gadgets and gizmos, but when we analyze the film, we can see the majority of the game is played within the 18s, both, and then if you do it the opposite perpendicularly, we're playing in that space the most that we can. We think that that suits our roster. We think that suits our the formation that we typically play out of. But we're excited too. This upcoming year, I mentioned earlier already, right? That the roster is the healthiest it's ever been. I think it's going to give us a lot more flexibility, that we can, maybe alter some of the formations that we go out as opposed to kind of just sticking with one for the whole year. But the nice thing about having that game model out of that mid block allows us, a little bit more freedom to change the shape without really changing who we are, on the ball or even off the ball defensively. The shape of would just be an opportunity to get different styles of players on the field as opposed to different team style throughout the game.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Well, Coach, we've covered a lot of ground, and I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. And I always like to end these the same way, and that's, if you had one piece of advice, one nugget that you would want every parent, player, anybody going through this college recruiting process to know or think about, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, one nugget's really hard to narrow down, right? I love this. Like I mentioned, that I coached at the high school level for almost 10 years before making this transition, and so getting guys to play in college is a passion of mine. At Valley Forge or anywhere else, to be fair. I think the biggest though is it all comes down to go to where you're wanted. Um, and go to where you want to go. Obviously, if you're only wanted at a place that you don't want to step foot on, right, like that campus, then maybe your journey's done, right? But I found a lot of times that whether you're talking transfer portal, whether you're talking junior college, whether you're talking Division 1, 2, 3, NAI, like there's a lot of really good programs out there with coaches that really want a very specific type of player, type of young man, type of family, and you just got to find that. In my opinion, is if you find where you're wanted, from the guys in the locker room, from the coaching staff, from the school, you're going to enjoy that experience a whole lot more. Maybe you might not play there as much as you would have thought, or maybe you're going to play at that team more than you would have at the school that you wanted to be at, or something like that. But I found that when you find that fit where you're wanted, genuinely wanted, it provides so much more freedom, right? You're walking into preseason not as anxious, right? Because that the coaching staff wants you there. That the guys that are returning, you've already built some relationships with, you've connected with those guys. They want you, to share the same jersey with them, right? I think that's ultimately, right, that's huge, and I think that's the most important thing. There's a lot of other things as well that goes into it, but I think ultimately for me, that's what I tell guys when I was a high school level coach, and I tell that to guys here, like, if you feel that you're not wanted here, you know, then maybe this isn't the best fit for you. Like, but if you feel like this is where you're wanted the most, I think you should follow that for sure.
Awesome. Well, Coach, wish you the best of luck in the fall.
Thank you.
Hopefully you continue the path of what you're doing there. It sounds like you're making great strides, and hopefully you'll see that on the field with this new conference alignment you got
Yeah.
going on there. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll definitely check in with you later. But if you get down to Florida for any recruiting events, let me know. Somehow you have a kid from our town down here in Florida up there. But
There we go.
thank you for the time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.